Episode 21, A Risky Business. After they had signed the contract, Michelle and Elliot discussed the details of the collaboration until they had reached an agreement. Mr. Branders Jr., you were braver and more direct than I'd expected during those negotiations, Michelle commented as they left the coffee shop. Is that right? Elliot grinned, reveling in her approval. If he was honest, he hadn't felt at all confident during the negotiations, but he had understood one important principle. A collaboration must be mutually beneficial and maximize your own situation while considering the needs of others. Collaborations can only be successful if everyone wins. But I still think that investing in Starstorm TV is really high-risk. Stop, Elliot interrupted her with a smile. We've invested the money now, so we might as well just get on with it and do our best. No, you're right. I'm feeling pretty good right now. Come on, said Elliot with a wave of his hand. Dinner's on me. He took Michelle to a nearby restaurant. While they were eating, his phone rang. He removed it from his pocket and saw that it was Miss Davison. He quickly answered the call and politely asked, Miss Davison, what can I do for you? Elliot, you haven't been to any classes for days. What's going on? The teacher asked in her usual cold tone. I haven't been feeling great. I've had a stomachache for the past few days, Elliot explained, hastily making up an excuse. How are you doing now? Did you go and get checked out? Her tone was suddenly warmer. This made Elliot a little uneasy. He hadn't expected the fierce but beautiful teacher to have a gentle side. After a brief pause, he replied, Miss Davison, I'm fine now. I'll be back in class tomorrow. All right, don't be late. Goodbye, Miss Davison. When Elliot finished his call, he noticed that Michelle was pushing food around her plate with her fork. She seemed to be in a daze. He reached out and snapped his fingers in front of her face and, with a concerned smile, asked, Michelle, what are you thinking about? Nothing. Michelle came to and lowered her head to continue eating. Seeing her so off guard, Elliot couldn't help but tease her. Have you been single for too long? No. Have you ever had a boyfriend? No. What a waste. You're gorgeous. Don't worry, I'll fix you up with someone, he joked, enjoying his good mood. After dinner, they went home. It was still early, so Elliot walked into his study and resumed his reading. Seeing his portfolio, he suddenly felt an uncontrollable urge to go online and purchase some shares. After buying $1 million worth, he continued reading for a while. Before going to bed, he checked his computer and discovered the shares he had bought had risen to more than $8 million. What the fuck? He was so excited that he jumped up and down on the bed. He had never imagined a profit could skyrocket so quickly. This was such a fast way to earn money. He'd made millions in a matter of hours. It was easier than robbing a bank. But just as he was about to cash in, his computer crashed. How could this happen at such a critical moment? He thought. He was so furious that he slammed his fist down on the table. He needed to upgrade his tech since he would be relying on it to earn more money. And this machine was a disaster. He eventually managed to reboot the computer. When he opened the shares page, he found that the $8 million had decreased by more than $1 million in just a few minutes. He had never felt anything as thrilling as he had at that moment. He could feel his heart pounding. In a few hours, he turned $1 million into more than $8 million, and then lost $1 million in a flash. This was too damn stimulating, but it was better than any roller coaster he'd ever been on. Seeing that there was still a downward trend, Elliot quickly withdrew his money and returned the remaining $7 million to his account. Although you could earn money quickly by playing with stocks and shares, you could also lose it just as fast. In a worst-case scenario, he could have lost that whole investment overnight. He sat back in his chair and let out a long sigh. His heart was still pounding from all the ups and downs he had just experienced. If he wasn't careful, he could lose everything. Investing in the market was playing with fire. He wasn't short on money right now, and he wanted to keep it that way. He turned the computer off and went to bed. Elliot got up early the next morning and rushed to the school, fearful of being chastised by Miss Davison if he was late again. He hadn't attended classes for a few days, so he stayed in school for his compulsory lessons, but his mind remained on last night. He decided that he needed to prioritize buying a better computer to avoid another crash. After school, he took a taxi to Cyber Superstore, Hillsdale's biggest tech outlet. They sold just about every type and brand of computer imaginable. The store was separated into two areas. Area A was where high-end computers were concentrated, while Area B's computers were more affordable home PCs. Elliot walked around Area B for a while, but felt he needed something more reliable and high-end, so he decided to visit Area A. where prices range from $2,000 to $20,000. He liked the look of a few computers, but he couldn't get the attention of a salesperson. He felt completely invisible to the people behind the counters. Pissed at hanging around and waiting to be served, he approached the counter and, with a forced smile, said, "Hello, I'd like some advice on buying a new computer." "You want to buy a computer?" The middle-aged saleswoman glanced at him with disdain and contempt in her eyes. "Yes," Elliot nodded and smiled. "Can you please recommend one?" "Do you see Area B on the other side? That's where we stock our budget range. You might find there more your pace," she said in a mocking tone. With that, she went back to what she was doing, too busy to bother with the penniless loser in front of her. Elliot shook his head at the contempt with which this woman had treated him. He said nothing more, just turned around and walked toward another counter. After taking a few steps, he heard someone shout, "Elliot!" Lifting his head, he saw a man standing behind the counter with an arrogant smile on his face. Luke? Luke had attended high school with Elliot. A pretty girl was standing beside him, Elliot's ex-girlfriend Rachel. Drenched in jewelry, she wore thick makeup and had an air of importance about her. Upon seeing the couple, Elliot's heart sank, and his mood instantly crashed. He hadn't been prepared to run into his ex. Seeing her familiar face, his mind raced as memories of the past resurfaced. Episode 22. A Slap in the Face. Back then, Elliot and Rachel had gotten along great. Many of their classmates envied them for being the perfect couple. Unfortunately, their relationship hadn't lasted long, and it ultimately fell apart due to financial reasons. Within 6 months, she had grown to despise him and had thrown herself into Luke's wealthy arms. Rachel and Luke didn't go to college after graduating from high school. Instead, they walked into the county clerk's office holding hands and got married. His parents had a business, and his family was pretty well off. After they got married, his parents leased a counter and cyber superstore for them to sell high-end computers. "Yo, is that Elliot?" Luke gazed at him as if he were looking at a zoo animal. He addressed him in a cold, mocking tone when he said, "I heard you're in college now." "Yeah," Elliot nodded. He had been heartbroken when Rachel left him. He hadn't expected Luke to snatch her away, and he took it very badly. Seeing the two of them together still hurt, and he couldn't shake it. At the time, he had sworn to himself that he would become powerful and successful enough to make her regret abandoning him. "What's the point of going to university? Look at you, you're no different from a hobo," Luke taunted him. He couldn't help but show off. "Look at me. I've never set foot in a university and I'm still my own boss. Did you know that Rachel and I have a lease on this counter? It's really exclusive here. The rent's more than $15,000 a year." "Is that so?" Elliot replied with a cold smile. Luke's attitude disgusted him. "I'd tell you how much I make, but you'd drop dead with shock if I did." He pulled at his collar and raised his head proudly. "I earn more than $80,000 a year standing at this counter. From the looks of it, you probably couldn't earn half that in twice the time. I mean, it's clear why I'm the only one who can satisfy Rachel." He put his arm around her waist and said, "If she'd stayed with you, you'd both be living on empty stomachs." Luke derided him as he raised his head and let out a crazed laugh. Rachel looked at Elliot with disdain and sneered. "I don't know what I was thinking back then. What was I doing with a pauper like you?" The corners of Elliot's mouth twitched fiercely, and his heart felt like it was being ripped from his chest. He had loved this girl, who now turned out to be a selfish, gold-digging witch that only cared about money. "Luke's right. Thank God I didn't stay with you. Who knows what would have become of me?" She curled her lips in mockery as her eyes filled with scorn. She was annoyed and embarrassed to even be talking to someone dressed in such a cheap outfit. After giving him another contemptuous look, Luke couldn't resist asking, "You came here to buy a computer, right?" "Right," Elliot nodded. "Then you're in the wrong place. This is Area A. We only sell high-end computers here. If you want to buy a computer, you can go to Area B. Everything's cheaper there," he said with a dismissive smile, pointing to the opposite side of the store. "I don't want a cheap one." If it wasn't for the fact that he really needed a computer, Elliot wouldn't have wasted his breath on him. "Can you afford a decent one?" "Of course." Luke pointed at one of the computers behind the counter. "Look at this one. It's a solid machine, but it costs $4,000. Do you have that kind of money?" As far as he knew, this kid was a bum who couldn't even afford proper clothes, so how could he afford this kind of computer? Pointing at a different machine, Luke explained, "This one's more affordable, but the processor is a bit slower." Elliot shook his head, indicating his disinterest. He had come to buy a specific league of computers. These ordinary models wouldn't cut it. His requirements were much more advanced than this. Luke couldn't help but laugh out loud as if he had heard a joke. Even Rachel snickered. When he pulled himself together, he exclaimed, "God, you're useless at everything, but you do know how to put on an act." Rachel continued looking at him with disgust and disdain. Having not seen him for a few years, she was surprised that he was so good at pretending. A $4,000 computer isn't good enough for Elliot Branders? That's hilarious. He declared, "I don't like any of your computers." He turned and walked toward another counter. "It's not that you don't like them, it's that you can't afford them," Luke jeered without restraint. His laugh caused Rachel to shake her head and smile. Even the saleswoman at the opposite counter found it amusing. Elliot was done with Luke and Rachel. At the next counter he asked, "Do you have more advanced models than those?" "Yes," the middle-aged salesman answered eagerly. He recommended a few popular products. Elliot still wasn't satisfied, so he made his request clearer. "What's the best of the best that you have here?" "The best tech we have is all in the Elite Workstation Suite." "All right, then I'll go for that." "Those are custom built. They need to be ordered in advance, and..." The salesman eyed him skeptically and reminded him, "Well, they're very expensive. Too rich for most people's blood." "How rich is too rich?" "There are different categories in the range. The most expensive one here is over $20,000, and the cheapest is just over $5,000. If I'm buying one, I might as well buy the best," Elliot said decisively. "I'll take the $20,000 model." By all accounts, the performance of that range was worth the price, so he decided to take the opportunity to buy one. He didn't want another computer that would break again. He might as well just buy some decent tech and be done. Rachel and Luke burst out laughing once more. They were laughing so hard that tears rolled down their cheeks. Eventually, Luke managed to spit out the words, "Elliot, you're such a dick. Let's see how you're going to pay for this then." "You don't have to worry about that." He took out his bank card and handed it to the salesman. "I'll take one Elite Workstation Suite with the best possible specs, please." "All right." The salesman accepted his bank card doubtfully. He still didn't believe that this young man could pay a $20,000 bill. But in seconds, his eyes widened as he declared, $20,000 successfully paid. "Are we done?" asked Elliot. We're done. Thank you, sir. And have a nice day," he responded as he respectfully returned the bank card. Luke and Rachel had disbelief written all over their faces as they watched the receipt print. How's that possible? How can he spend $20,000 so casually? Thought Luke. The two of them felt their cheeks turn scarlet and burn, as if someone had slapped their faces good and hard. Episode 23. Who do you think you are? The saleswoman was stunned when she saw Elliot buy the Elite Workstation Suite from the neighboring counter. She regretted not being more helpful when she had had the chance. She had thought Elliot was just another penniless student, but who knew he was so wealthy? "Thank you for your business, sir," exclaimed the salesman as he handed Elliot the receipt. He was so excited that his lips were slightly trembling. He had never sold a computer of this caliber, not in all his years of doing business. The profit on this sale alone was more than $5,000. If only all people who do business were as sincere as you. Elliot took the receipt with a smile. "When will my computer be ready?" "I'll get it sorted within 3 days, or sooner if I can." "All right, I'll wait for your call." Elliot turned around to leave. As he walked past Rachel and Luke's counter, he paused for a moment. They looked dumbstruck as they watched him leave, gutted that they had missed out on such a big sale. The salesman walked in front of Luke's counter, shaking his head. "Was that gentleman an old school friend of yours?" "Yes," Luke replied through gritted teeth. "You had the nerve to mock him, and he's wealthier than the lot of you." The salesman grimaced as he shook his head and scoffed. "He spent $20,000 on a computer. That's what you earned in 3 months. Who do you think you are, taunting someone like that?" Luke lowered his head and didn't respond. Rachel, who was standing at the side, felt uncomfortable. She never imagined that the loser she had once abandoned would actually become successful. She couldn't help but feel a pang of regret. If she had thought for 1 minute that Elliot could be successful, she wouldn't have abandoned him for Luke. Unfortunately, it was too late. The following morning, Elliot returned to school. He walked into the classroom and saw that Kevin's seat was empty. He's never skipped class before. Why isn't he here? Elliot wondered. Elliot looked around the classroom and saw Niall. "Where's Kevin?" Niall rubbed his neck and mumbled, "Kevin went to the hospital." "Why is he at the hospital? Is he sick?" Elliot's expression tensed as he asked. "His mother is seriously ill and was hospitalized." "His mother?" "She has a serious illness and needs an operation. But apparently he hasn't raised enough money to pay for the surgery yet." Niall scratched his head awkwardly. "Kevin told me not to say anything to you. He's too proud to ask for help." "Idiot." Elliot cursed quietly and asked, "Which hospital is she in?" "Hillsdale General." "Right, I'm off to find him." Elliot didn't say anything else. He turned and ran out of the classroom. He had left the room so fast that he almost knocked Miss Davison over. Her face darkened with anger and she scolded, "Elliot, are you about to skip class again?" "Yes, no," Elliot replied at first, then quickly shook his head and explained. "Kevin's mother's been hospitalized. She's seriously ill, and I need to find him to see if I can help." "Is that right?" Her tone became much gentler. "Okay, off you go. I'll put it down as an authorized absence." "Thank you, Miss Davison." With that, he left the classroom as fast as he could and took a taxi to Hillsdale General. When he arrived at the hospital, he saw Kevin kneeling in front of a doctor who was wearing a white coat, pleading, "Doctor, you have to find a way to cure my mother." "Your mother needs heart stents. Without insurance, you need to find $40,000. The doctor waved his hand impatiently. "Doctor, I don't have that kind of money right now. Can you treat her first and then I'll pay the hospital back? Some sort of payment plan?" Kevin begged, tears rolling down his cheeks. The doctor's face tightened as he shouted, "No money, no treatment. This is a hospital, not a charity." His expression was cold, as if he didn't feel the slightest amount of sympathy, despite Kevin's pleas. Elliot couldn't take it anymore. He rushed over and yelled, "Kevin, get up!" As he helped him up from the ground, he was surprised to see him and said, "Elliot, what are you doing here?" "I made Niall tell me. How could you keep something like this from me?" "I didn't want to be a bother." "Right, well, that can wait. Quickly tell me what's going on." "Shit." Kevin put his hand to his forehead and sighed. "My mother has thrombosis and needs stent surgery. It costs $40,000, and even after doing everything I can, I'm still short by $20,000. "Don't worry. I can pay," Elliot said comfortingly. He turned his head toward the doctor and said, "Hurry up and get ready to perform surgery on Mrs. Miller. If you want me to operate on her, you have to pay first," the doctor yelled stubbornly. Elliot was immediately angered by the doctor's attitude and reprimanded, "What kind of bullshit doctor are you? Doctors are meant to treat the sick and save the dying." From the moment he had set eyes on the doctor, he hadn't liked him, and he relished the opportunity to curse him out. "You, son, are wasting your breath. Hospital rule states you must either hold insurance or pay the bill before receiving surgery," he retorted. "You're not listening to me. I told you to prepare for surgery, and I will pay the bill now." "What, now? You're going to pay, are you?" The doctor looked at Elliot with disdain. "You've got $40,000 sitting about doing nothing, have you? Who do you think you are looking down on people like that? You don't know me." Elliot was furious. From the beginning, the doctor's attitude toward Kevin had angered him. "Are you in a position to pay or not? If you pay the fees, I'll perform the surgery." He raised his head and looked at Elliot provocatively. By his estimation, there was no way the kid in front of him had the means to pay. "Right, I'm on it." Elliot didn't want to waste any more breath on the doctor and took Kevin to the reception counter. The doctor followed with an expression of derision on his face. Elliot handed the receptionist his bank card and said, "Please charge $40,000 on my card for Mrs. Miller's stent surgery." The receptionist was stunned. She had never seen anyone make such a large payment without notice or insurance before. Many families have been broken by smaller fees in the past. She took the card with a look of surprise on her face as she pondered this. After swiping the card, she froze for a moment. "Let me guess. Payment declined?" said the doctor, standing behind him, laughing. "The transaction's been authorized. The gentleman has just paid the entire amount." Her heart was beating furiously. The doctor almost choked on his words. He coughed a few times and looked at Elliot in astonishment. He had had no idea this kid was so wealthy. His attitude instantly shifted. "Sir, I shall prepare for surgery immediately," he said respectfully. Episode 24. We're so grateful. After paying the medical fees, Elliot turned back to the doctor and asked, "Now that I've paid for the operation, can we have it?" Yes. The doctor nodded courteously, not daring to offend him further. "Hurry up and organize the best specialist to operate on Mrs. Miller," Elliot urged as he glared at the doctor. Yes, he answered, and quickly set to work. "Elliot, thank you for paying for my mother's treatment," Kevin said gratefully, as he leaned on the reception counter next to him. "Come on, Kevin. You've been there for me plenty of times in the past. I'm just glad to be in a position to help you," he said with a warm smile. Kevin was a good person who had helped him a lot over the years. He couldn't just stand by and watch his friend suffer. I can't believe you've done this. Before Kevin could finish his sentence, tears were rolling down his face. Not in his wildest dreams had he expected Elliot to give him so much money in his hour of need. The money might not have been a big deal to Elliot, but to him, it was an astronomical amount. We're friends. We should help each other, Elliot said, as he patted Kevin's shoulder. And men don't cry. Oh, and in the future, don't be so quick to kneel in front of others. All right, Kevin wiped away his tears and, with a trembling voice, said, I'm so glad I know you. From here on out, we're brothers. There's no need to be so serious. Whatever happens, we'll always be friends. I'll find a way to pay you back. We can talk about it later. Treating your mother is what matters right now. He took the initiative to change the subject and said, Right, let's go and see her. All right. Kevin forcefully wiped away his tears and took Elliot to the 4th floor. When they arrived at her room, his mother was lying on the bed. She looked thin, pale, and old. She had worked tirelessly for her family her entire life, but now her body was failing her. Mom, Kevin held his mother's hand as he said, We've paid the hospital fees, so they'll be operating soon. I was told that the operation cost $40,000. Where did you get that kind of money? She looked nervously at her son, anxious to know the answer. It was an astronomical amount to their family. How had he suddenly managed to obtain it? I hope he hasn't done anything stupid or illegal, she thought. Mom, this is my school friend Elliot, Kevin explained, pointing at him. He's the one who lent me the money for your surgery. When she heard this, she became agitated, and tears rolled down her cheeks. Elliot, thank you for helping us. She dragged her weak body as she prepared to climb out of bed, wanting to express her gratitude toward him. However, she was too weak, and before she could get up, she fell back onto the bed. Mrs. Miller, don't try to move. Save your strength. He quickly leaned forward and placed one hand gently on her shoulder, hinting for her to lie back down and stay still. Elliot. She held onto his arm tightly, and her voice trembled as she said, You've saved me. I can't thank you enough. Kevin's been good to me in the past and often helped me out, so it's only right for me to help you now, Elliot said with a smile. Hearing this, she cried even louder. Kevin's so lucky to have a friend like you. Friends have to help each other in times of trouble. Kevin, don't you forget what Elliot's done for our family. You'll have to repay him one day, she warned her son. I know, he fiercely nodded. All right, Mrs. Miller, get some rest. I'll come and visit another day after you've had your surgery. Elliot was afraid of exhausting her, so after a simple farewell, he left the room. After Kevin escorted Elliot back down to reception, he gratefully repeated, Thank you so much for this. Let's not talk about it now, Elliot interrupted and patted Kevin's shoulder. Take good care of her. Call me if you have any problems. I'll be off now. With that, he left the hospital. Elliot had to pass by a Starlight restaurant on his way back to school. He asked the cab driver to pull over so he could check out the restaurant. He was thrilled to see that it was bustling. Customers were pouring in, and the servers were extremely busy. Investing in Starlight Restaurant appears to have been a wise decision. It won't be long before I recoup my investment. He stood quietly in the corner watching the customers and the wait staff. The lobby manager soon noticed him, and always looking for his approval, eagerly approached his boss. Mr. Branders Jr., you're here. Why didn't you call to let me know you were coming? I don't need any special treatment. You're here to greet the customers, he instructed. The lobby manager had been there when Elliot was negotiating the purchase of Starlight Restaurant with Jack, and he made a lasting impression on him. Mr. Branders Jr., what can we do for you today? The lobby manager maintained a radiant smile. I'm just checking in. So, how's business going? The restaurant's been doing very well lately. I'll show you the books. He hurried over to fetch them. After giving them a quick look, Elliot nodded with satisfaction and said, You're doing well. Profits are much higher than before. It's all thanks to your leadership. Stop flattering me. He rolled his eyes at the manager, smiled, and said, You've all worked hard. At the end of the month, I'll give all employees a portion of the profits as a bonus. Thank you, sir. The lobby manager then told the waitstaff, Mr. Branders Jr. is giving us a bonus. How about that? Fantastic! When they heard they were to receive a bonus, they all gathered around and praised Elliot for being a good boss who takes care of his employees. each approaching him to express their gratitude. As long as everyone does what I ask and does a good job, there will be plenty of bonuses in the future. You'll receive so many bonuses, you won't know what to do with them all, Elliot told the small crowd. All right! The waitstaff cheered in unison and applauded. The entire restaurant was in an uproar. Seeing that more and more customers were gathering, Elliot reminded the waitstaff, all right, everyone, hurry up and get back to the customers. Don't fuss around me. Yes, sir. They continued to busy themselves. Their boss had inspired and motivated them, making them want to work even harder. Episode 25. It's Too Late to Regret. After encouraging his employees, Elliot's attention returned to the lobby manager. Do you think there's anything we can do to improve the running of the restaurant? Our restaurant is already running perfectly. The lobby manager raised his head proudly. Within 30 miles, no restaurant could surpass Starlight when it came to scale, grandeur, quality, or service. No other venue was a match for them. I disagree, said Elliot, pouring cold water on the sentiments. According to my observations, although our restaurant service isn't bad, our waiters' attitudes aren't that great. Like you, everyone seems a little arrogant. Huh? The lobby manager was rendered speechless. Also, regardless of the increase in customers, the quality of our dishes must not drop. Quality must always be consistently high, yes? I understand, he promptly replied. Follow my instructions. Now I must leave. Elliot turned and walked out of the restaurant. Truthfully, there weren't any problems with the quality of the restaurant service or dishes. He was simply keeping them on their toes because he didn't want his staff to become complacent. When he returned to school, Elliot found that the classroom was a hive of activity. The class committee was proposing they organize a party. Some students were enthusiastic, while others were not. Some people didn't want to participate because the proposed dinner was Michelin-rated, costing hundreds of dollars for a single meal, and everyone had to pay for themselves. A few $100s was nothing to students from wealthy families, but it was the equivalent of 2 weeks' living expenses for others. Some would have to really tighten their belts after the party. Let's all go to the Silver Spoon for dinner tonight. It's a little pricey because it has Michelin stars. Does anyone have any objections? The class committee consulted everyone. No objections. Half of the students expressed their support. The others tried to make excuses for not being able to attend, such as they didn't have the time. In fact, many of them didn't want to waste their money on a party. It was supposed to be an exciting gathering, but because almost half of the class was not attending, the whole thing fell a bit flat, and the atmosphere turned cold. Pathetic. It's because you don't have enough money, and what you do have, you can't bear the thought of spending on a party. Arrow couldn't resist mocking the classmates who didn't want to participate. The other wealthy students also began to jeer and ridicule the others. They were annoyed that, without enough people there, the gathering might be boring, and their fun would be spoiled. Very quickly, two factions had formed within the classroom, the rich and the poor. The arguing ensued. Quiet! Fed up with the endless quarreling, Elliot walked to the front and announced, Tonight, I'll treat everyone to a meal at the Silver Spoon. He didn't want his classmates to fall out permanently over this, and this was his solution. All right! The students erupted with joy when they heard that someone was treating them. God, I'm sick to death of him, muttered Arrow in contempt. The moment he said this, he riled some of the girls who loudly retorted, Arrow, you can't afford to pay for it. Please save your comments when you treat everyone to a meal. Arrow gritted his teeth and didn't know what to say. He did have money, but he couldn't bear the thought of wasting it on treating his classmates to a meal. If you don't want to pay, then shut your mouth. Elliot invited us to a meal out of kindness. Don't you dare scold him. A few girls had begun to despise Arrow. He was so angry that his face turned red, and he finally fell silent. All right, it's getting late. Let's go to the Silver Spoon. Elliot looked at the time and led his classmates out of the room. They all arrived at Silver Spoon, and after they had ordered their meals, they began chatting happily. Many of the girls were secretly discussing Elliot. Recently, his popularity had soared. The waiter placed several plates of delicious food on the table. The students sat around and tasted the delicacies. As they ate, they chatted, and the atmosphere was harmonious. The students didn't go out of their way to please Elliot just because he was wealthy, but he was happy with this. It would have disgusted him to think that everyone around him was being fake and sucking up to him. After the meal, Elliot walked over to the French doors with his glass of red wine. As he was looking out the window, his mind raced with countless thoughts. Never in his wildest dreams had he imagined that one day he would become a millionaire and have endless possibilities. He had no idea what lay ahead for him, but he was determined to work hard and never give up. While he stood in quiet contemplation holding his wine, Kate walked over, also carrying a glass of wine. Tonight she was elegantly dressed in a long cowl neck dress with delicately applied makeup. She looked seductive and sexy. Perhaps because of the wine, her face was flush. She raised her glass to Elliot and said, "Sorry about the other day. I shouldn't have treated you like that. The past is in the past." He smiled and sipped his wine. He no longer had romantic feelings for Kate. Looking at the girl before him, he felt nothing but calm. "Elliot." She leaned in close to him, blinking to accentuate her beautiful eyes, and said in a gentle tone she had never used before, "I was an idiot. I'm sorry. Will you give me another chance? I know I've messed up, but I won't make that mistake again." He smiled, turned around, and prepared to leave. There was no way he would fall for this vain gold digger again. He had already taken 2 steps away when Kate grabbed his arm tightly. "Elliot, I've realized that the person I truly love is you. Is there still a chance for us? I love you." "Oh, now you want me? You totally humiliated me in the coffee shop the other day. You didn't like me then, so it suddenly changed." Elliot retracted his arm from her grasp. "You messed up, Kate. I can do so much better than you." With that, Elliot huffed and quickly walked away. He had seen Kate's true character. She was a snob who only cared about money. Unfortunately for her, she was the type of person he despised most, and she disgusted him. "Elliot." Kate's face instantly paled. She knew she had blown her chance at true love and happiness.